Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Till Mets Do Us Part, live on Twitter, live on YouTube, a little bit later in the day this week, but be that as it may, we are here ready to rock. And of course, the best way to interact with this show is right now, is live, where your comments come in real time with myself and Ibby. But if you don't have the opportunity to do that, as soon as we end the broadcast, you can head on over to our YouTube channel and watch anything that you may have missed. And of course, you can always listen to the audio version of this show as a podcast wherever it is you get your podcast starting tomorrow morning, all courtesy of the Chop Sports Network. John Sapanaro out in Los Angeles, California. Matt Ibby Ibanez back in New Jersey. Ibby, we got a lot of stuff to talk about this week with our New York Mets. But first of all, how you feeling?
I'm feeling pretty good, John. Obviously, again, everyone, we're used to our normal 4:30 start time. I had to do a little daddy daycare today, so I am wiped out from taking care of a toddler and a newborn. So I am a little beat, but I am not beat enough to not get behind this microphone, talk Mets with you, talk Mets with the fans, because there is a lot going on. I'm excited to get into it and also to continue our conversations about all these rumors that are floating around.
Well, listen, you know what? In fairness, we're both a little bit to blame because you said, hey, can we record at 7 o'clock? And I was like, cool. And I sent you everything. And then I didn't hear from you. And you're usually very good about texting me and letting me know like where your status is. So I had everything set up. I had the room all ready. I was sitting here and then I was like, you know what? Ibby's not here yet. I'm going to go change my laundry over. So we're about 12 minutes later than normal, than scheduled. And that part is on me. So we're both a little bit to blame, but we are ready to rock. Look, we have to start with the obvious thing, which is Edwin Díaz signing a record deal, moments, seconds. Realistically, it was less than 24 hours after his free agent period opened, after you could announce that you've done deals with your own players. And the Mets, look, they said they wanted him back. Díaz said he wanted to be here. There was a rumor floating around during the World Series, maybe a little bit before, that this could get done very, very quickly. And Ibby, all of that wound up being true. The contract all in is 5 years, $102 million. It's a $12 million signing bonus. Average salary is about a little over $20 million per year. He's got an opt-out after year 3. And then, of course, he's got a full no-trade clause. Your thoughts on now the highest paid closing pitcher of all time, Edwin Díaz?
Well, I think it had to get done. We talked about it on the show last week. I look back on our recording because I was like, I'm pretty sure we talked about this and we nailed it when we said, you know, when this World Series ends, expect to hear something about Edwin Díaz relatively quickly. And sure enough, it happened relatively quickly. We hit the nail on the head on that one. I'm happy it happened. And look, the fact that you see people throw out there, oh, it's a lot of money. Oh, it's a reliever. Doesn't matter. This had to get done no matter what. You have a team that's in win now mode, needs its closer. We have it. Again, this bullpen is in flux, but we have the back end sealed up. It made all the sense in the world to get him locked up in here the foreseeable future. The opt-out that he has can work for him. The fact that people are working the back end of this deal, it doesn't matter. If this was the Wilpons, yes, it would be an issue, but it's not the Wilpons. It is Steve Cohen. So I'm not worried about back end money when relievers might tend to fizzle when they sign long-term record-breaking type of contracts. But look at it this way. They see him as a 28-year-old lethal closer who's probably considered the best in the game coming off of his best season, an incredible history-making season. And just the sheer fact that when you look at the length of it for 5 years, look what he's done to this point. He has 96 saves as a Met. 5 more years. Okay. You're talking now, if you're looking in the long scope, looking at it through the long lens, that this is someone, if he stays the course, which again is always questionable when it comes to relievers, but if he stays the course, you're looking at someone that could be potentially challenging for the all-time saves when it comes to a Met closer. It's possible. He's averaged 32 saves a season so far, and I think he would have to average 36 saves over the span of this contract. Is it doable? Sure. But the point being, you're looking at someone that could be, really etching himself in the Mets history books moving forward.
Yeah, and look, I think the Mets need more of that. We've talked a lot last year during the season, especially around Old Timers Day, and since the Steve Cohen acquisition of this team, that the Mets have a great, rich history that some people ignore. But that's also not to say, Ibby, that the Mets don't need a little bit more history there. The Mets could
Right.
use, guys who are elite spending the bulk of their career with the Mets, and I think this Edwin Diaz deal goes a long way to that. Stevie Mack in the comments, as always, says, pour some sugar on me. Diaz stays a Met. And look, it's funny because there's always going to be the good and the bad when it comes to deals of any length for pitchers and deals of any length for relief pitchers. We understand that relief pitchers are fickle. We understand that you don't want to get in bed with these guys on long-term deals, whether it's a starting pitcher or a relief pitcher, if you can avoid it. However, there are some times when you cannot worry about that. The Mets go into this offseason with literally no one who threw a pitch in their bullpen under contract outside of Drew Smith and a couple of spare parts guys who are younger guys who have, just kind of been around over the last year or two. They needed some stability. And what Edwin Diaz does is he provides you that stability. The other part of it is, look, this guy came here and failed miserably. The way we have seen so many free agents come to the Mets or come to New York in this sport and other sports fail. He fell flat on his face. And to his credit, now you and I were always steadfast on Edwin Diaz. We always said we didn't have a show the first year he got here, but over the time that we've had this show, we've always said, Diaz was a good acquisition. Diaz has not been the guy that he was in Seattle, but he was a good pickup. Well, you know what? Last year, he was the guy from Seattle. He was probably better than the guy from Seattle. So now you're looking at a relief pitcher who, like you said, is 28 years old and to this point has not had one but two elite closing in on all-time years for a closing pitcher. The year in Seattle before he got here and the last year that he just put up with the Mets. The other part of it is, and I said it on this show last week and the week before, and I hate to beat a dead horse, but I'm just going to say it one more time, Ibby. The way he was treated by some fans, the way he was treated by the media, the way people turned on him when things weren't going good, he could have easily, in a contract year, the kind of year that he just had, turned it on and said, you know what? I did my job. We made it to the playoffs. We won 100 games. And now I'm going to go somewhere and get my money. And it's going to be less stressful. And I can go to the West Coast. I can go down south. I can go back to Seattle. You just pick a place, whatever. He can go back there. Instead, he dug in and said, no, I love being here. The bad stuff, that's on me. I was bad. Now I'm good. I love it. I want to be here. And I think sometimes, Ibby, apart from the on-the-field stuff, which speaks for itself, because good teams need closing pitchers, and the Mets need a bullpen, period, because they don't have one right now outside of Edwin Diaz and Drew Smith. Sometimes you need to reward a guy. And I think when a guy goes through what Edwin went through here, and he has the ups and the downs, and he says, instead of jumping ship, instead of collecting money somewhere else, I want to be here, you reward that guy.
Yeah, and I think it's really, I think what people need to understand also is the fact that this isn't just taking on what you think is a great closer, never pitching in New York, handing over a 5-year, $102 million contract. This is a guy that is tried and tested in these, these hot waters of this town, and he thrived. And again, we talked about he started from 0 and really rose himself all the way up to 100, if you will. And, he, there's no reason why he doesn't deserve this money. I don't care for look, we don't have to sit here and talk about the Keith Laws of the world. We don't have to talk about the discourse that people were talking about when it came to the overall money. It didn't matter. This was a smart move. It needed to get done. It happened fast. And the most important thing to me about the entire thing is that it establishes a place where this team can start in terms of this free agent period, which we've talked about at length, is a very important one.
Yeah, and look, the Keith Law stuff, you guys know, if you follow me on Twitter, if you listen to this show, you know how I feel about The Athletic. I think putting stuff like that behind a paywall is an absolute joke. Because whether you like them or not, look, we all make fun of Andy Martino. We all make fun of John Heyman, whatever. But these guys, and guys that are quite frankly better and more serious than them, like the Jeff Passons of the world, and then you go to the other sports and you look at Schefter and Rappaport and Wojnarowski and these guys, they put it out for free.
Yeah.
I don't care. Ibby, I cannot stress to you enough how little I care about Keith Law's opinion on this topic. The Mets need a closer. The Mets have an elite closer who wants to return. You pay him the money.
Yeah.
It's like people forget that Steve Cohen owns this team. And look, I'm not trying to LOL Mets, same old Mets, all that stuff, because you and I have been trying to get rid of that for a long time. But so many of these people out there just want to keep it alive. You see it even with guys like Heyman. You know, Heyman's reports, the last 4 or 5 tweets he's put out that have anything to do with the Mets. Mets aren't interested in Judge. Jake doesn't want to be here. Can't understand why the Mets would be interested in Turner. And, my free agent predictions, none of the big guys are going to sign with the Mets. Now, look, he might be right? Like, you don't know.
No, yeah.
What these guys say, like, how in the world, when you look at the holes, and this Mets team is good, but they have a lot of free agents now in this moment. Therefore, they have a lot of holes. They either have to bring guys back or they have to look outside the organization because they don't have a lot of prospects that are ready to slide in, like the Gavin Luxes of the world and whatever's going on in out here in LA, right? They don't have that. So they're going to have to fill these holes outside the organization through trades or through free agency. And the fact that you can sit there with a straight face and not even predict that some of these guys come to the Mets is laughable to me. You know, Bleacher Report has Jacob deGrom going to the Padres. They have
I saw that one. Yeah,
the Padres. Jacob deGrom going to the Padres.
Yeah.
That bucks every trend that you could possibly think of. That he wants to go to a smaller market. He wants to go closer to Florida. That he wants to go somewhere where he could be the automatic ace. And look, he's going to be the ace no matter where he goes. But like, he ain't going to the Padres, bro. Bleacher Report. Like, they're just putting out shit just to have fun with it. But like, call it what it is, because we're all just guessing. And when you sit there and you label yourself as an insider, when you sit there and you put your stuff behind a paywall and you're like, the Mets got a great closer in Edwin Díaz, but that deal, not so great. Like, that was the headline from Keith Law on The Athletic or whatever. Yeah, dude, most big money deals in sports, specifically in baseball, don't work out with, heavy air quotes there, right? Yeah. Because you're overpaying guys for what they've done in the past, not what they're going to do. Now, when a guy's younger, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, like Diaz is, of course, you're hoping that he's good for the life of this contract. But it's just so ridiculous to me that you got to sit there and it's like, guys, stop this insanity. Where else were the Mets going to go, Ibby? If not to rein this whole thought back in, and I'm sorry.
It's okay.
If not Edwin Díaz, what are they going to sign? Mark Melanson to be the closer?
No, it doesn't make sense. And another one that I bring up a lot. I don't bring up that a lot, but I always check in because I'm always curious because I don't know if this guy is real or not. There's the Hot Stove Intel handle on Twitter, which claims to be
you mentioned him before, right?
Yeah, it claims to be a somebody within the industry, agent-wise. It acts as his burner account, whatever. I don't know if I buy it, but there are some people, like legit accounts, that do follow him. Blue checks, of course. Blue checks is a big topic for another day, but blue checks nonetheless. But yeah, it's like the fact that he put out a tweet the second it happened, and he said, for all I know, this could just be somebody like me sitting in his basement, who knows? But he puts out a tweet basically saying, the Mets handle it, the huge overpay. If they let him go to free agency, they probably could have got him for like $40 million less. I'm like, there's no freaking chance that this guy was going to sign for less money than what Chapman was getting and less on a yearly than what Hendricks got. It's like, no, come on, you got the cash. It doesn't matter. You have a rich owner who's going to eat the money if it's sucked on the back end anyway. So it's a win-win for everybody. That's it. Cut and dry. That's it.
Yeah, and I think, and I don't have it in front of me, and I apologize for not having it in front of me, but I think his average annual value is like $2 million more than Hendricks or $2 million more than Chapman, whoever was the top guy. And when you look at it, when you look at the deferrals, because there's $26 million in deferrals, which every club does. I don't want to hear about fucking Bobby Bonilla. Every club defers money. There's also a signing bonus attached. His luxury tax threshold number on a yearly average is $18.6 million. And if he's going to give you the kind of production that you've already gotten from him, that is fine. Guys, again, you have a rich owner, and I know the tenor of baseball has changed over the last decade or so because no one was saying anything about this, pre-punitive luxury tax and stuff like that. Like when the Yankees were doing it 10, 15, 20 years ago, nobody was talking about it. But it's like, I have to deal with this from Met fans alike. And Ibby, we talked about this too. People say things where they're kind of stuck in the past. And it's a great point that Chris Torres brought up. He said, F. Heyman, he's living back in 2003. He's just mad we're the new evil empire. Whether that's true or not, I just look at the fact that, guys, some people argue with me all the time when I'm like, the Mets should go sign Judge and DeGrom and Díaz. And they're like, well, Cohen's not going to have a $500 million payroll. And I'm like, yeah, he's probably not going to have a $500 million payroll, but he could. He could. And I still stand by what I said weeks and weeks ago. It's probably going to be $350 million, which is nothing to sneeze at. It will be the highest payroll the Mets have ever had. It'll be the highest payroll in baseball. Like, guys, I don't know if people understand sometimes $17 billion is more money than any of us, and he's still making money. Ibby, that's more money than any of us can even conceptualize.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just, I think the fact that, like, to bring it back to the Heyman thing with like Turner and everything, I don't understand why. Look, I said on the show last week, I said when we talked about Nimmo and the idea of holding the bag and somebody like a Turner or a Correa not wanting to come here because of position, if money was equal, say. But again, money always talks. So to sit there and say, oh, I don't understand why the Mets would be interested in Trey Turner. Well, he's only one of the best players in baseball. That's number one. Oh, and he's also had time where he has played second base. So if you're going to say, well, he wants to be a shortstop. Yeah, well, if the Phillies, which are the hot topic now, which I thought from the jump, I thought the Phillies would be the team that'd be hot from the most.
Phillies make a ton of sense for Trey Turner.
It does. But here we go. If the Phillies said, hey, we'll let you play shortstop, but we're going to give you $275 million. But if the Mets said, hey, we love you, we want you to play second base, and we're going to give you $310 million. I'm not saying that's what it's going to be, but if that was the case, then you can love shortstop all you want. I guarantee you're going to love that extra money instead of that. So again, it always comes, no matter what, in any sport, baseball, basketball, football, doesn't matter. It always comes down to the money. Every single time. So to say something like that on his end was just ignorant.
And that's a good segue because I wanted to talk about Turner and Brandon Nimmo and some of the other rumors that are out there. A couple comments coming in, by the way, about the bullpen. Not ignoring you. I just think we're going to get to the bullpen coming up in a little bit. So I'm just going to hang on to those comments from Stevie Mack and from Chris Torres and a couple other folks. By the way, if you're watching us right now, we're live on Twitter. We're live on YouTube. Till Mets Do Us Part. John Sapanaro, Matt, Ibby Ibanez, and we're talking all things New York Mets as we always do, and watching us live is the best way to interact with the show and have your comments and all your questions and concerns and all that stuff heard in real time. Ibby, I got into this weird debate, with people on Mets Twitter because, and I knew it was going to be a polarizing topic, but I just tweeted out the Trey Turner career stats, the Trey Turner 2022 stats, and then I highlighted the games played over the course of their careers for Trey Turner and Brandon Nimmo, and I did them as a 1-for-1 comparison. And a lot of people agreed with me, but a lot of people disagreed with me. And that's fair because and I said it in interactions that you and I have had on Twitter, you're a bigger Brandon Nimmo guy than I am, but I acknowledge the fact that Brandon Nimmo is a very good ball player. And I don't want the Mets to get stuck holding the bag. I don't want the Mets to move on from Brandon Nimmo and then wind up screwed because they then miss out on some of these other free agents. That's why I think, for me, and I said it 2 episodes ago, I would prioritize getting one of these other players, whether it's Judge, whether it's Correa, whether it's Turner. I would prioritize getting one of them back before Brandon Nimmo. And once again, not a knock on Brandon Nimmo. I think Brandon Nimmo is very good. I think the other people that we just mentioned are objectively better, and they are great. And I think where the Mets are, especially offensively, they need an infusion of great talent somewhere. So I know that it's an apples to oranges, square peg, round hole if we're talking about Trey Turner, because you're going to have to move Turner. Now, Turner's best position defensively is probably shortstop.
Right.
When you look at his overall numbers in the other spots that he's played in, he's a lesser defender at center field and second base. But also Lindor is a better shortstop than Turner, so you are going to move him. I understand it's complicated, Ibby. And look, you could disagree with me if you want, but I don't know, man. I don't get and I said this. I think a lot of Met fans do, and you've said this, and your point is well taken. I think a lot of Met fans undervalue Brandon Nimmo, and maybe I'm one of them, but I think some of them undervalue him to the absurd. I just think in this market where he's the second best outfielder behind Aaron Judge, he's going to be overvalued. I don't know if I want to give Brandon Nimmo $20 to $25 million a year for 6 to 7 years when he's at 30 years old and he only has one season of 150 plus games played under his belt. For me, that's what scares me off. So, just your thoughts on this Brandon Nimmo stuff, the stuff that I tweeted. Chris Torres says Ibby's about to go off on you now. John, watch out.
No, I'm not going to go off. Look, everything you said is well taken, because we've talked about this offseason a lot to this point. We're going to continue talking about it, that the way you can build this team is endless. There are so many ways you can go about this offseason about how you want to better this team and how you want to construct it. But when it comes to Nimmo, again, the point I was just trying to make, and I thought everything you said was well taken, and I was listening to everyone in that thread as well, because look, I do think that people do undervalue him, and I think we were talking with somebody this morning just I look at it from the defensive standpoint as well. I know we need the infusion of offense, but I could also say, look, I know that Trey Turner can be a plus defender on the infield, taking away the shift, having speed up the middle. If you told me I could have Trey Turner and Francisco Lindor up the middle for my defense, that's incredible. I think that's awesome. But I could also then turn it the other way, and I can say, well, if I do that and you're telling me I have to move Jeff McNeil, who is an adequate outfielder, he's fine. I'm not saying he's bad, but he can do his job if you can move him to left. And then if you had Canna or Marte in center and then the other in right, like, you can make it work. But at the same time, I do think that those guys are better placed in corner spots, and I think Nimmo will be better in the outfield in terms of center, based off the defensive improvements that he's made. But your point is also well taken when it comes to his injuries. I could say he's only done it for one full season, legit, and we saw what he can provide. And I could say as a comp that the type of contract he probably should get if he wasn't the second best guy on the market in terms of the outfield like he is this year, which could push him up towards $150 million and getting George Springer money, would be similar to what the contract was for Byron Buxton, which was like around $100 million that had things built in because they knew he was never healthy, and there would be escalators to reach a certain number so it gets higher and higher. It would probably fit better into that based off what he's done to this point. But like I've said before, he's going to get closer to George Springer money because of the market and because of the fact that his stats are better than that of Buxton's, because he's actually been healthier than a Buxton has been. So you look at all the new stats, new baseball, the sabermetrics, all that stuff. He checks all those boxes. So I believe Scott Boras when he says that there are 8 to 12 teams that are after him, because he makes sense for a lot of teams. I do think he's going to get his money. Do I still believe that he's going to be prioritized by this team? I do. I still think that he is going to be prioritized. I know I said last week that I think he might go because I think Jake is going to be the one that does get the cash and does come back. But that doesn't take away from the fact that I think that this team is going to go maybe not above and beyond, but really close to that bar to try and bring Brandon Nimmo back, because of what I mentioned before in terms of if you're not able to convince these guys to change positions to help you on this team, well, then you have to make sure you bring your guy back.
Yeah, and look, again, great points, and I don't necessarily disagree with you. I really don't. When I think 10 teams should be in on Brandon Nimmo. I think Brandon Nimmo is that good. But when you look at you could make a case that 2022 was Brandon Nimmo's best season, despite the fact that his on-base percentage was a little bit less than it was in the past, which is true. That was a little down, but his defense went up to an elite level, plus playing center field every day, plus he was basically healthy the entire season. So when you look at all of that in totality, you could say that this was his best season. And I'm just going to throw out some numbers from this season, and I know they're not the be-all, end-all when it comes to, analytics and advanced statistics, and there's no WOBA in these numbers, but I'm just looking at it for everybody that told me. Some people had the audacity to say to my tweet that the numbers I provided show without a shadow of a doubt that Brandon Nimmo is more valuable than Trey Turner. And I just want to say, Brandon Nimmo's 2022, he had a WAR of 5 even. He had 580 at-bats full season, great, 159 hits, 16 homers, and a 274 batting average. Again, I know these are not all the stats that everybody loves. But you look at Trey Turner, the only stat that he is lesser than in Brandon Nimmo for 2022 was WAR, and it is 0.1% smaller. He is at 4.9 WAR. He had 652 at-bats, which meant he had more at-bats. He was healthier. They also batted around a lot. I get the whole thing, blah, 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 blah. He had 194 hits, 21 homers, and 200 and hit 298 for the season. When you look at his career, he's got a 29, almost 30 WAR. He's a career 300 hitter. He's got more pop. He's led the league in stolen bases twice. He's also, which is something Brandon Nimmo does not do, despite the fact of how fast he actually could be. And he's led the league in hits, and he has a batting title. You tell me when Brandon Nimmo, and you're a defender of his, has done any of that. Look, I know that these are not, people were giving me weighted runs created plus and all that stuff. I know there's other metrics to measure players, what they can give to a team, their attributes. I understand that. And these are not the be all end all. But I just think when you look at some of these stats, you look at some of the advanced statistics, some of the traditional ones, and you just look at it with your eyes, you have to know that Trey Turner is better than Brandon Nimmo. I can't tell if Ibby is muted. He got real quiet there for a second.
Hello? You got me?
There you go.
Okay. There we go. No, I mean, I said this on the last show too. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say that Brandon Nimmo has a higher ceiling than a player of Trey Turner's caliber. I believe that Trey Turner has a much higher ceiling. Trey Turner is a 30-30 type of talent. Even as he gets older, he still is a type of talent. And if not, then 25-25. Like, and he's a 300 hitter, and he's quick. Like, I have no problem if Trey Turner becomes him. I'll be ecstatic if he becomes him. Do I love Brandon Nimmo? Sure, I do. But at the same time, we've talked about this at length as well. When it comes to the idea of a team constantly changing and a team being in flux, but also being competitive, similar to what the Dodgers do. Guys come and go. They have Manny Machado, then they get Trey Turner. Then now they might lose Trey Turner, then they might get Carlos Correa. It's just like you're constantly shifting out players, and it's just, yes, you grow an affinity for these guys. And yeah, do I think it would be cool if Brandon Nimmo signed a 5-6 year deal and then basically he has a extremely long career as a Met and retires Met? Yeah, that would be cool. But at the same time, I also think championships are cool, and I want to win a championship as I want this team to win. And if Trey Turner puts me closer, then obviously I would be all about Trey Turner. So comparing the two is difficult because, again, different positions, and I don't think it's fair to assume that if he came here, that being Turner, he would play the outfield. I don't like that comparison. I think he'd be more so a second baseman. So you're looking at it where McNeil kicks to the outfield. Maybe you sign a glove first, Kevin Kiermaier type to fill in and work your way around that with the versatility. Maybe do something like that. But again, by no means am I ever going to complain if my favorite team landed Trey Turner. I mean,
let me ask you this to kind of put this conversation to bed before we head into the break as well. And everybody who's listening and watching in real time, we appreciate the comments coming in. See a lot of them. We're going to talk about the bullpen and the starting pitching in the second half. So we're not ignoring those, especially from Stevie Mack and Chris Torres, who are frequent commenters. After the break, we'll get to all of those. Ibby, a lot of people commented and said, why not both? Why not both Trey Turner and Brandon Nimmo? Which... okay, sure. I'm not going to say no to that.
I'm not going to complain.
I'm not going to complain about that. I just don't know that would be the best allocation of resources, because while Trey Turner does provide some things that Nimmo doesn't in terms of speed and in terms of he's got more pop, he hits for a higher average, all of that stuff, I don't think that he's enough of a power hitter to spend your two big moves on the offense in one offseason on bringing back Nimmo and Turner. Now, if you told me they were going to do, Nimmo and Correa, I could get behind
a little different.
A little bit more. You know, if you told me, and obviously they're not going to do this, and this one doesn't make sense, but because they both play the same position and they're not going to go all this money in the outfield. But if you told me they were going to bring back Nimmo and sign Aaron Judge and put Judge in right field and Nimmo's going to play center field, that makes sense to me. The Mets then have a leadoff hitter and they have somebody who's going to hit third, and then they have somebody who can protect him with Pete. And to me, that kind of machination in a lineup makes sense. I just don't know what you do with Nimmo, Turner, Marte, Lindor, and McNeil, all of whom should probably ideally be batting in the first 1, 2, or 3 spots in a lineup. Plus, by the way, you've got Alonso, who's going to be locked into hitting fourth. I just don't think that's the way I would build out an offensive lineup, especially knowing that I can go in any direction in one offseason. Now, if for some reason the Mets were able to acquire Turner at the deadline last year, obviously you put the pieces in and you just hope that you have enough good players to win and it's irrelevant. But in terms of building it out, I wouldn't go that way. What do you think about bringing in both guys?
Well, like I said, I was messing around with some off-season ideas about what building this team would look like, and that was one that crossed my my notepad, if you will. And I looked at it as if that first of all, that would only happen if they lost DeGrom and they wanted to reinvest money and they wanted to go elsewhere. So then if you looked at it, like you just rattled off all those names, if you plug those guys throughout a lineup and you sprinkle in Francisco Alvarez and you sprinkle in Eduardo Escobar, DH and catcher, and you fill out that lineup, and it's just like, it's a very interesting lineup in the sense of, if you do that, it fits the style of hitting that this team has taken on with Eric Chavez and how they played last year by plugging in a Turner. But to your point, it still lacks the power aspect. Now that would put the pressure a little bit on Alvarez to become that power guy. Or if you decided, hey, I allocated all this money towards the likes of Turner and Nimmo, now I'm going to go a little bit on the cheaper power side. Maybe I bring in a Jock Peterson. Maybe I look into a Hunter Renfroe if he's available. And those are guys that can provide pop. And then you can play with the outfield DH there. But then you're also, if you do something like that, you're kind of going on the cheaper end for the pitching. Maybe you bring back a Bassett. Maybe you look into a Senga who's coming over from Japan. Maybe you're looking at those guys and trying to fill things in. But yeah, it's when you do something like that, it's difficult because, like we've talked about, he has all the money in the world. We know that, but that doesn't mean he's going to spend all the money in the world. He's going to spend, but at the same time, I think they want to make sure that they are fitting it in properly.
Yeah, I can't disagree with any of that. Look, let's put this conversation to bed. Let's head into the break. We're at 33 minutes. We'll be with you guys for another 30, 35 minutes or so. Everybody who's watching live that has watched live before, you know that this is just a quick ad break for the audio version of our podcast that has a few ads thrown in that we don't need to do on the live version here on YouTube. So it's John Sapanaro, it's Matt Ibby Ibanez, it's Tilt Mets Do Us Part. We'll be right back in a few seconds. Yo, just like that, we are back. I told you guys it was going to be quick. John Sapanaro, Matt Ibby Ibanez, talking all things Mets offseason now that free agency is open and underway. I think a good place to go, because we can take this in a lot of different directions. But I think a good segue for all of the comments that are coming in on the starting pitching and the bullpen would be to talk about the Mets do officially pick up one option of $1.5 million with Daniel Vogelback. I think that makes a lot of sense. Even if he is just purely a bat off the bench, $1.5 million is nothing in terms of a baseball salary. So I think that one made a ton of sense. But then they declined an option about 20 minutes or so before you and I went live, and that is a $1.5 million option for Michael Givens, who they went out and traded for. You and I both thought Givens would be back. So to me, Ibby, it's curious. He was down, and then he really finished strong. But again, 1.5, not a lot of money for a guy in your bullpen when you're trying to build a bullpen out basically from scratch.
Yeah, I when I saw that, I was really shocked because, like I said, I've been messing around with these offseason ideas and filling out this team with multiple signings. And Givens has been a guy that's been a constant for me when it came to someone that I thought would come back. And when, see this decline, it raises some questions for me, like how they're going to go about building this pen. Are they going to dump some more money into it instead and attack the likes of a Robert Suarez and a Rafael Montero and an Andrew Chafin? Like, is that the aisle that they're going to choose to go in, as opposed to taking but again, it was only 1.5, so it's like I don't understand. Like that's the thing that's kind of throwing me off a little bit.
For me, I would have thought, and I threw up Stevie Mac's comment here underneath because he had mentioned this earlier in the show, and thank you for reminding us of it. But, for me, Ibby, look, again, the Mets need to build a bullpen basically from scratch. They did a great job by bringing back Edwin Díaz immediately. I had Díaz as the top offseason priority for the Mets, and then if you're going by top 5, my 5th one was going out and getting a setup man for Edwin Díaz. Whether that's his brother, whether that's Chafin, whether that's Suarez, whoever it might be, go get a setup man. And then I also thought they would bring back some of these guys, Givens, Lugo, maybe Ottavino, and push some of them down, so where Lugo's your 7th inning guy, or, Givens is your 6th inning guy, and they're not kind of thrust into these positions. The reason why it's curious for me is because of how small the dollar amount is. Because look, sometimes you decline an option on a guy and you're like, well, we declined the option, but we're going to bring him back like on a smaller deal. Like Givens is not getting less than $1.5 million. He's been a good major league pitcher his entire career, and he can get that money, if not more money, elsewhere. So I think that for me is the most curious. I would have just signed that just to have another body in the bullpen. I would have picked up that option if it were me and if it were running the team. It does make me think, Ibby, that they're going to go either via trade or via free agency, quote unquote, big game hunting in a major way for this bullpen. I could see them now signing 2, maybe 3 guys for the bullpen.
Yeah, I mean, like when I was messing around with some of the stuff, I had Givens if hitting the market, I had him getting like a 2-year deal for like $8-9 million. I thought that's something he could get. So the fact that you're turning down the 1.5, it's like it's a little peculiar to me. But yeah, that tells me that they have a plan of attack, what they're going to do, because if you're going to give away cheap options that proved, again, over some time, because he did have that rough start, but he proved over time that he can pitch in those big spots. But if their numbers basically are saying to them, look, we got what we got out of him, it didn't work the way we wanted to go, so we're going to let him go, and we're going to attack, X, Y, and Z instead. I got to let it play out, because even though it is one that makes me raise an eyebrow a little bit, there are a lot of arms out there, whether it's via trade or the free agent market, that clearly they have an idea of what they want to attack, and they're going to go after it.
Yeah, it seems like it. And Chris Torres kind of echoing what we said. I thought Givens was a lock to come back. And again, it's, sometimes you got to look at it as, where the value is for the team and the player and how that aligns. Again, I don't want to go back to the Brandon Nimmo conversation. We talked about it for 20 minutes. It's not that I don't like Nimmo. It's not that I don't think Nimmo fits this team like a glove. It's the fact that he's a free agent. When he's a free agent, where else they need to spend money and all that stuff that makes me say, I don't know if that's the avenue I would go down. Now, if you told me if Givens was just free, outright free, the way Ottavino and Lugo and May and all these guys, Trevor Williams, the way they all are, I'd say, yeah, Givens is probably the guy I'd want to bring back the least if I had to re-sign them. But when you can just go like click and sign something and you're like, oh, this guy's back on a $1.5 million deal, to me, that was the most curious part. The Mets did make another transaction today, though, per Anthony DiComo. They did put in a waiver claim on left-hander Taylor Saucedo, I believe that is, from the Blue Jays. He held lefties to a 1.82 average over the last 2 seasons in Toronto. So, certainly not a splashy one, but it does look like they're looking around for that lefty out of the pen, and they're, throwing some stuff at the wall while also probably, looking at a guy like Chafin and others.
Yeah, I mean, you're always going to have opportunities when you have guys like that where it's like, oh, well, the thing that was posted first, I think, was like, oh, he pitched to like a 5.4 ERA, but it's like, oh, it's like a little bit deeper. He's a lefty, maybe he's for lefties only. So the numbers that he has there, you give a guy like that a shot because why not? Some guys come out of nowhere. We've seen it happen with this team before. But I still think obviously they will attack the left side of that bullpen to try and bring somebody else in that's a little bit more established. But taking a risk on someone like that, not wrong with that at all.
No, and now we'll really get into the comments that Chris and Stevie Mack have been throwing out in the first half, and we appreciate you guys being patient as we switch focus to the starting pitching. Ibby, you and I gave some suggestions as to where the Mets would go for their number 3 starter last week, and you mentioned a guy like Woodruff. I mentioned a guy, that wouldn't be available off the rip, but might be available midway through the season if they don't spend a lot of money here in the offseason, which was Tyler Glasnow. But they bring up 2 interesting ones, and yeah, you do hear these rumors. Stevie Mack brings up Woodruff's teammate, which is Corbin Burns, apparently being on the trade block. I could see that happen. I'm sure that you'd be fine with that, and I'm sure that the deal would be comparable to what you would try to do to get Woodruff. But here's the interesting one, and I looked during the break and during some of your comments, and I couldn't find it, but Chris Torres says he saw a guy on Twitter, don't know if it's true, someone close to Zach Gallen's father said the Mets are trying to trade for Gallen. That would be big. And then there was a little bit of back and forth here. Stevie Mack saying, I heard the D-backs were looking to bolster their farm system, so it makes sense. And then Chris Torres saying the Mets were trying to trade for Gallen, I believe, last offseason before they went out and got Bassett, so it makes sense. I mean, Gallen is a guy that fits. Corbin Burns is a guy that
kicks
fits.
Ass.
Yeah, I mean,
he's a good pitcher.
Again, it comes down to what you'd have to give up to get one of these guys. And I'm not, look, you and I don't have any insider information as far as that stuff is concerned, but I think their comments, both Stevie and Chris, I think they're thinking along the right lines. I think Met fans need to be prepared for a deal to acquire a number 3. More than likely. I think that if you put a gun to my head, I would say that's more than likely. That's more likely than, getting Rodon. I think the Mets are going to trade for a number 3.
I agree with that. And, if Zach Gallen is really like I said last week, I went through a lot of the teams. I didn't think that Zach Gallen would be available because with how the Diamondbacks are building, it seems like he would be a part of their solution along with the likes of Corbin Carroll and the rest of the young team that they have. But, if he is available, maybe they're worried about the arbitration years. Maybe they want to get out in front of it now and just take on some prospects. I don't know if that's the case, but if a Zach Gallen was available, I would 1000% attack that. He's a very talented guy. He really put it all together last year. He had a strong season. And I think he's on the upswing. So acquiring someone like that would be an absolute coup because he's a young guy. He fits the bill of what this team needs. It would come down to price. And if they were truly if they were putting him out there, it could be one of those, hey, really blow us away here in order for us to move him. So it's like you'd be paying high, but even paying a little bit higher because it's more so he's out there, but he's not really out there. And then someone blows him away. And it's like, oh, well, yeah, sure, we'll do that. Thanks. It could be something like that, but it's definitely in the right realm of arm that we were talking about last week, whether it's a Woodruff or a Gallen or a Pablo Lopez, like all those types of those are the guys.
Lopez is a good name. I think Lopez can be had.
Those are the ones that are interesting and I think are potentially available. So we'll see what happens.
You know what's funny, Ibby, and as you're saying that and we're having this conversation, I think fit-wise, the Mets would definitely benefit from getting a guy like Gallen, or, look, I know he's not available anymore, but a guy like Luis Castillo when Castillo was available last year, right? A guy
Right.
who's got some control and a guy who is young. And I think that would be absolutely the best case scenario. Because the Mets are going to be spending a lot of money in a lot of other areas. And if they get somebody who's only got one more year of control left, they're going to be back in the same position they were in with, Bassett, or the last year of Stroman, where they're going to have to maybe acquire somebody again. However, the cost of acquisition is really what is so strange to me. So when I look at a guy like Rodon, while I say, yeah, I think it's more likely the Mets go out and trade for somebody, I'd like to see them trade for somebody who's got a couple of years of control, but that's going to cost the Mets more than likely more than what they want to give up, because they are still building out this farm system. And I don't think there's enough there for them to turn around and give up, 4 players for a young pitcher who's got, 2.5, 3 years of control. So to me, that's sort of the back and forth that the Mets are dealing with here in trying to, and look, the domino that needs to fall is DeGrom, because I think if for some reason DeGrom leaves, if DeGrom leaves, you go get Rodon. Right? Like if DeGrom leaves, you sign Rodon. Like you don't even think about it. You give him money. He's probably going to get less than what DeGrom was going to get anyway, in terms of AAV and all that. So it's just a real curious situation to me, because, I want to see where the Mets can maneuver in this marketplace, knowing that they have a lot of money that they need to spend, despite the fact, maybe, that they can spend it, and knowing that they don't want to part with top prospects. And to me, that's the most interesting part, outside of just signing Aaron Judge for this entire offseason.
Yeah, and as you were saying things, I was just looking up because I was curious on the coverage in terms of contract for some of these guys. Zach Gallen, under control at the age of 27 until he's 30. So you have him for 3 years. That's going to cost a lot.
That's going to cost you a lot. You're talking
that's going to cost you a lot.
Plus.
That's a lot there. So then you look at someone like Pablo Lopez in division. Okay, so that makes it tough a little bit, but he only has 2 years of control. But then I bring it back to Brandon Woodruff, who I think could be the target because he's a little bit older. He's already 30 years old. He's at the third. He's going into the 3rd and 4th year of his arbitration. So 30, 31, he becomes a free agent at 32. So I think that could be a guy that could be had if the Brewers are trying to rearrange how they are trying to attack their building process over there. And I know they're in flux a little bit with Stern stepping down, but I know that they like I know that Matt Arnold is a guy that they really like over there as well. So how they're going to build is going to be interesting, but seeing those numbers in front of me right now, I think Woodruff, though still going to be pricey, I think that's the one that you could potentially attain out of those 3 options that we just mentioned. I think he might be the one.
Yeah, and look, I just want to jump back into the comments. We've got a lot coming in. Gil Almonte says Gallen would be perfect. I agree, just in terms of fit. But moments before that, and Gil follows us on Twitter. Is great interaction. Says, first time watching you guys live, great stuff, which we appreciate the compliment.
You, Gil.
Thank you. And Stevie Mac doing our job better than we do. Stevie Mac says, make sure you subscribe and like the video, Gil. Stevie Mac needs to be on the payroll, and I say that lightly because nobody makes any money doing this. It's podcasting. So all that being said,
but yes, subscribe.
Look, yes, subscribe, all that stuff. This is another conversation and we make a real point here as kind of just bounce around now throughout the free agency landscape. He said, here's another thing to think about. Will the qualifying offers scare the Mets away from signing certain players? Ibby, your thoughts first.
I think it's dependent on the player. If you told me that they really want Trey Turner and he has a qualifying offer, I don't think that they're going to worry about losing that pick because they have Trey Turner. And obviously, when you have picks like that, you want to get a Trey Turner type when you make those picks. If I'm giving that up to have a Trey Turner, I don't think it matters. Do I think that they are going to attack players that do not have the qualifying offer? Because of them going over the tax and not being able or losing higher end picks and then not being able to gain back based off of their qualifying offers on their players because they went over that tax. It's later in the draft as because they went over that money, obviously. I do think it's going to be something that they are cognizant of, but it's dependent on the player. Like when I was doing some of my stuff before, I was looking at guys that had qualifying offers and who didn't when it came to the pitching market, specifically the back end. So if the likes of an Andrew Heaney, a Tyler Anderson, like those types, if they have the qualifying offer attached to them, I do not think the Mets will go after them. But if those guys do not have it attached to them, I think that they go after them. So it's really dependent on the type of player that has that thing attached to them. Because based off of the new rules, I believe players like Correa and Rodon cannot have the qualifying offer on them, correct? Like players like that, I think.
I'm not sure if that has started, to be honest.
Okay. I'm not sure if they have it or
I
not.
think
But
the rules are still the same as far as you have to be traded midseason. I could be wrong on that, but I'm not 100% sure. I know a lot of that stuff changed.
Yeah, but I think that they're going to it's player dependent. So Trey Turner, I don't think it's going to pull them away. But some of the back end guys, if they have the qualifying offer attached to them, I think that will force them or have them look in another direction for somebody that might not have it attached to them. Example, if again, I brought up Hunter Renfroe before. If Hunter Renfroe has a thing on him and Mitch Haniger doesn't, they'd most likely look at Mitch Haniger instead as opposed to a Renfroe. So something like that.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned Haniger because he's the guy I was going to mention. There was a report that Jerry DiPoto said it's unlikely they extend the qualifying offer to a player like Haniger, maybe because they think he's going to take it. So yeah, if a player who's good and not great like Haniger, and there's an opening somewhere for the Mets to add a right-handed hitting outfielder to the mix, depending on who they acquire, yeah, I think if Haniger doesn't have a qualifying offer attached to him, he makes a ton of sense. I think when you're playing in the deep end of the pool with Aaron Judge and Trey Turner and Carlos Correa, doesn't matter. Rodon, doesn't matter. The qualifying offer will not be limiting in that sense because, look, those guys are going to get qualifying offers. It's the way the system is built out. So they're going to get it. And if you want to acquire a player of that level of talent, there's really nothing you can do about it. So then we got a couple more comments here coming in. Chris Torres says, I hope that they don't let the DeGrom issue drag on so they can come to a conclusion quickly enough so they can move on to plan B and C. Stevie Mack then responding saying, sounds like they have a deadline for DeGrom, so at least they won't waste too much time waiting on him. And then a few more back and forth comments between the two folks, kind of just echoing that sentiment. Ibby, I think that's why Jake jumps to the top here because he's a lot of money. And dominoes are going to fall. I know that there was talk like, the Mets would pursue Aaron Judge if DeGrom leaves. Sure, but I think the Mets need offense and DeGrom. So I think they could be working both of those angles at the same time. But I do think, like I said before, if Jake leaves, I think they become serious contenders for Rodon, where I don't think they necessarily are if they bring back Jake. So it is in the Mets' interest. I would love for some movement to happen on this by the next time we record next week with DeGrom.
I would say just in general, when it comes to, I know people are saying like it's a fast moving market and everything, but when it comes to these markets now, you have to understand something. The New York Mets, no matter what, unless a player specifically says to their agent, I do not want to go to New York, the Mets are always going to be at the top of the list because they have the biggest purse. No matter what, their names are always going to be bantered about. Their names are always going to be said, and agents are always going to check in with them. So no matter what, specifically when we're talking about DeGrom here, okay, I think that they're handling it properly. I think that once free agency officially opens, they're going to say, Jake, we talked about this last week when it came to like the thought process when it came to the Yankees back in the day. Look, we have a number that we're comfortable with. We'll tell you that number. We have that number at 3 years, $140 million. That's what we want to give you. But please, go on out. If you get better than that, come back to me, tell me what it is, and we'll see if we can make it work. I think that that's the way they're going about it with Jake. Now, I would also think that, when you have this relationship with somebody and their agent and they've been here for a long time and they're a legacy type player, there would be that type of respect where it'd be like, hey, we're kind of working with something here, working a lot of angles. It's a lot of money. So if you can let us know within 48 hours, 72 hours, whatever it is, something along those lines, I think it's something that could cripple a lot of franchises. But when it comes to Cohen, I think they're going to have a lot of irons and a lot of different fires trying to keep things moving because if anything, they understand that things can change on a moment's notice. So do I think it should get done quickly? I wish it would. I wish there would be some movement on it, but I have a feeling that some of these teams are going to hem and haw when it comes to Jake, mainly because of the health issue and him trying to push for more money because with, all due respect, there's nothing wrong with him wanting to get paid based off of what he's done and what he thinks he can still do. It's the best pitcher in the game when he's on the mound. But the key word there is when. So it's really going to come down to, is somebody truly willing to go to that fourth year? Is someone truly willing to spend upwards of 150, 70, 80 million dollars as opposed to the like the example that I was using where I would say 3 years, $140 million. Is someone really going to give an extra $40 million? I don't believe it. But then again, I said this when it happened. The Texas Rangers, they don't sign on Bruce Bochy to do a rebuild. They're going to keep spending money. So they spent a lot last year. They're the team that makes the most sense to me that would throw the cash as opposed to the Braves. I don't buy the Braves. I do buy Texas as the top dog in terms of money that can be spent. It's going to come down to, does he really want that money that much? And will he go to Texas?
Yeah, and the funny thing about the Braves too is, I don't think the Braves have a need for DeGrom. Now, look, everybody needs DeGrom because if he's healthy, he's that good, right? He automatically becomes your ace. He's excellent, all that stuff notwithstanding. But the Braves have a young, controllable, very high upside starting rotation. The Rangers are the ones that need to remake their starting rotation. So, I can see the Rangers really being in play for DeGrom, but I don't see him going anywhere. I am a little frustrated with this time of year with Scott Boras because he made some
had a
comments.
day today.
Oh my God.
He had a day today.
Whoever was talking about Brandon Nimmo, he's like, whoever picks our guy is going to get a good one because they found Nemo. And then with Taijuan Walker, he was like, Ty's the only guy who's got those innings who's under 30, so he's on an island, and it's really a question of who's going to Ty pay, like the island of Ty. I hate Scott Boras. I think that, dude, stop talking.
Wait,
stop.
There's one more.
I hate him.
When it comes to Carlos Correa, he's the Dior of defense. He's the Hermes of hitting. He's the Louis V of leadership, and he's the Prada of the postseason. Oh my God!
Does Scott Boras think he's fucking Ric Flair? Who is this guy? He's the jet flying, kiss stealing, wheeling dealing.
He loves his food analogies too. He was talking a lot about Wagyu steaks today and different types of steaks. Like, the guy loves his food.
I can't deal with Scott Boras, man. He drives me absolutely insane. I want to welcome Rael to the party saying, sorry, late. Read the Díaz contract. My son and my nephew are convinced that Díaz is going to become the new Familia. What would you tell them to make them chill? Listen, you can go back and listen. I don't want to rehash it for everybody who watched. We talked for about 20 minutes or so, Rael, at the top of the show about our thoughts on Edwin Díaz. I will just say it needed to get done. It needed to get done. He deserves to be paid. He deserves to be the highest paid closer in baseball. That's just how it works. And, I think it'll work out. If it doesn't work out, we have an owner that's got more money than everybody. So it doesn't matter. It's fine.
I would also say that to ease their concerns, that Edwin Díaz is a lot more talented and electric than Familia ever was. So I wouldn't worry so much about that.
Yeah, outside of that 1 year where he had the splitter and the sinker all working, he was throwing a 97-mile-an-hour split-fingered fastball. Like Diaz has better stuff than Familia.
Though I will say I did love Danza Kudu, though, that whole song. I did love the entrance, but still, it's no trumpets. It's no trumpets.
All right, so before we get out of here, we got a couple more minutes to play with. I do want to take it off of the free agency place just to talk quickly about our manager, Buck Showalter, a finalist for NL Manager of the Year. I think that the three guys are no surprise. It's Showalter, Dave Roberts, and Brian Snitker, the three teams that won over 100 games. All of that makes sense. I think, regardless, I think it should be Buck. I think Buck deserves to win his fourth Manager of the Year award.
It's a runaway. I think Buck wins in a runaway. I know what the Braves did was special, but everyone expected the Braves to be a top-end team. The Dodgers are the Dodgers. The fact that this was a plus 25 or whatever in terms of wins from the previous season, the tumultuous nature that this position has held for the Mets for so many years. He comes in and there's just a stability. There is a respect. There are so many things that went proper for this team. Granted, didn't end the way all of us wanted it to, but in terms of how the team operated, how they were able to, play in and night out at a high level to win 101 games. The other guys won 100 plus as well. God bless them. But I think what Buck did was more special.
I agree with you. For me, it's two factors more than anything else, really three, and you hit on two of them already, so I won't beat it too much. But I think the fact that this team took an almost 30-game leap in terms of wins from the previous year, I think when you look at the tumultuous nature of what has gone on with the manager's role for the Mets, going basically back to Willie Randolph, aside from a little bit of stability from a guy who probably outkicked his coverage in terms of a World Series appearance and Terry Collins, there's been a lot of nonsense. Willie Randolph fired unceremoniously, never got the chance to really do the job because of Tony Bernazard. Then we looked at Jerry Manuel and everything that happened with him. And then we go to Terry Collins, fine. But then we have to deal with, Mickey Callaway, who is an absolute garbage person and a terrible, terrible manager. We have the whole thing that happens with Carlos Beltran, and somehow we got screwed more than anybody else on that deal.
Right.
Luis Rojas, really good, but he's not for this, not at that time. Too big for prime time. So, when you look at that, those two factors, plus, look, I know the Braves finished basically the same record as the Mets, and I know the Dodgers had a much better record and were really, really good and were about to potentially maybe have the most wins all time before they fell a little bit short there at the very end. But it's not a sneeze at, Ibby, when your team wins the second most games that a team has ever won, your franchise, in 60 years. So those three things right there are three checks for me for Buck Showalter. So I think it'll be, I don't say this lightly, I think it'll be a travesty if Buck Showalter doesn't win. He absolutely deserves it. Last thing I want to bring up is the Mets made a couple hires. Most notably signing a guy away from the Reds as their director of pitching development. I believe it's Eric Jaggers. I don't know if he pronounces it exactly that way, but Ibby, Steve Cohen showing that financial muscle in a way that does not have to do with payroll on the field, and you love to see it.
Absolutely. Just again, we've talked about over this entire year and when we first started the show, when it came to flexing that financial muscle, it's not always about what's on the field. It's about attacking things in your front office. It's about building that infrastructure. And I read up on this guy. I don't know much about him in general, but I do follow a couple people that are close with the Reds. So I read their stuff from time to time, and the fact that they are singing this person's praises tells me it was a strong hire, and hopefully it can lead to some more success for our pitching moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, that's more than I could say about him. I don't know much about him. I'm just happy we don't have guys like Hugh Quattlebaum anymore. Just like
that guy wasn't even real. He didn't exist.
I don't think he existed. Stevie Mack with a good comment to kind of go off on here. He said, The guy from the Phillies should have been a finalist over Roberts. Having three managers from the NL East battle out for manager of the year would have been nuts. I do think it would have been cool, but I do think it's a little disrespectful to Dave Roberts, who, put together a great run all season long. I don't think Dave Roberts is a very good manager. I think he does a lot of head-scratching things. But I do think the fact that the dude, and his name escapes me, who took over for Girardi in Philadelphia deserves a lot of credit. But he also, despite making it to the World Series, they almost fumbled the bag and didn't make the playoffs under his watch, even after a great start when he first got there. So for me, I think the three finalists are fair, especially when three teams win 100 games.
No, I agree. I was just curious because I want to see if the proper person for the AL was actually going to win manager of the year, because I think the guy who was running the Orioles, I don't know his name, but that team just surprised the hell out of me, so he should definitely win. But yeah, it's no matter what, when it comes to this, I think Buck makes all the sense in the world. Respect to the other guys, but everyone knows who those teams were. People were still questioning what these Mets would be. If Buck, let's not forget the way people thought about Buck when this first happened. They said he's old, he's out of touch, he doesn't make sense for the analytical world. It's not. I feel
personally attacked by this.
I am not attacking my partner one bit, not at all. I'm just saying that there were some people out there that felt that way, not just you, people in the media as well, that felt that way. So again, just to bring that back up and just noticing that he did do well, he won 101 games. I think it simply comes down to seeing what the Mets were and what they came from and what they became. I think that makes all the sense in the world, and Buck is the NL Manager of the Year for the fourth time.
I agree with you on that. Do you have any final thoughts before we get out of here?
I'm excited for free agency to kick off. Again, I don't know how quickly things are going to move. I thought the greatest thing for baseball was not the lockout, but the fact that it created such hectic and craziness that gave baseball a shot in the arm that it desperately needed. I wish it was like that every year. I think that some guys will sign quick. We'll see what happens with the Mets. But for the most part, I'm expecting a lot of the big names to drag it out as long as they can to get some big cash. But I'm still excited nonetheless.
Great point. Chris Torres saying, John, cough, cough, LMFAO about the Buck Showalter comment. My final thought is a weird one. It's not one I usually do, but this made me chuckle, and it's very topical, and it all happened today. I want to give a shout out to somebody who is apparently not even a Mets fan, certainly does not listen to this show. I don't think I've never interacted with this person at all on Twitter. Their handle is @Hoodie Glasnow, and looks like their name is Ryan, and they are a Tampa Rays fan. They just screenshotted a picture of the Oakland A's Twitter account with their verified check next to it, simply with the caption, "How did they afford a check mark?" Which I think is peak Twitter. That is the perfect joke. A lot of you know I'm a stand-up comedian. I'm angry that I didn't think of that, but that needs to be celebrated. That is absolutely fantastic. How? And it's a legit question. How much longer will the Oakland A's have a check mark next to their name if Elon Musk puts all of that stuff behind a verified paywall? Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening. John Sapanaro, Matt Ibanez. Like I said, if you guys came to the show late, don't worry. As soon as we hit the end broadcast, you'll be able to watch the entire episode back on our YouTube channel, and it lives there. So you can find it tomorrow. You can find it the next day, blah, blah, blah. And also, speaking of tomorrow, if you want to listen to this, kick it old school, go via the Chop Sports Network and find our audio podcast. You can find us on Spotify, Google, Apple, Amazon, all of those places and more. And tomorrow morning, again, courtesy of the Chop Sports Network, Ibby and I will be with you guys all off season, and we'll be back next week. We'll see you then. Peace.